She slapped a human in front of billions and thought the story ended there. But humans don't forget pain. They store it, and they return when you least expect. When he came back, he didn't bring an army. He brought memory sharper than any weapon. The arena of Irica Prime pulsed like a living thing, towers of polished obsidian clawing at the twin suns. Suspended above it all, radiant on her anti-grav throne, sat the Red Queen of the Zerati Dominion. Limbs long and regal, her crimson skin glowed like molten glass. Her hair, a cascade of woven starlight, flowed down her back, framing a face carved from arrogance and silver fire. At the center of the pit stood a single human, barefoot, bleeding, shirtless, bound in electrified chains that crackled with quiet malice. The crowd, a billion strong across screens and systems, roared in blood-hungry adoration, chanting, mocking, praising the Queen's justice. She raised one slender hand, wrist draped in golden crystal. Silence fell instantly. Her voice rolled across the arena like velvet thunder. You trespassed into sovereign space. You killed 3 of my guards. And now, I grant you the honor of dying in public. The human said nothing, didn't blink, didn't lower his head. The Queen's perfect brow furrowed. Do you not understand? You are nothing. You are alone. You are already dead. She rose from her throne, drifting downward on the humming anti-grav field until she hovered inches above the burning sand. Without ceremony, without hesitation, she reached out and slapped him across the face. The sound cracked like a whip. His head snapped sideways, blood sprayed from his lip, the chains rattled violently. The crowd roared louder, gloating, vicious. But he didn't fall. He turned his head back, slowly, and smiled. The Queen blinked once. Something in that smile, it wasn't madness, wasn't hatred. It was a promise. You just became a memory, the smile said. And I'm going to make sure the galaxy remembers you like this. She took an instinctive step back. He didn't move. He didn't have to. The broadcast feeds lit up across 13 systems. Billions watched. And what they saw wasn't a criminal brought to justice. They saw a Queen hesitate. His wrist flexed slightly. Faint sparks danced around the magnetic links. The Queen's voice sharpened with an edge of unease. Guards, prepare the execution team. For elite warriors entered from behind, golden armor gleaming under the suns, shock staffs and thermal blades in hand. The Queen's voice rose, strained and imperious. Show him what happens when vermin challenge royalty. The human didn't react. He simply tilted his head down, rolling his neck with a slow crack, then whispered, not to her, not to them, but to himself. You should have killed me with the slap. But it was already too late. The viral feeds caught every moment. And deep in the subconscious of every soldier and noble watching, a seed of fear was planted. Because humans don't forget pain. They file it away. And when they let it out, it isn't revenge. It's a reckoning. As the first elite guard approached, the human's head lifted slightly. He looked straight at the Queen, bloodied, shackled, and smiled wider. Not like a victim. Like a storm. The Queen faltered. Barely. A breath, a heartbeat. But it was enough. The human waited. Not striking. Not pleading. Waiting. Because humans don't always fight back right away. Sometimes they wait. Sometimes they endure. And then, when you least expect it, they end you. The first elite lunged. And in that moment, everything shifted. The human moved, not with desperation, but with lethal precision. He twisted his wrists against the magnetic locks, subtle repetitive pulses weakening the joints hour by hour in his cell. Now freedom. The chain snapped up like a whip. It caught the first elite across the throat, sending him sprawling in the dust. The second elite blinked too late. The broken chain wrapped around his wrist, twisted, and pulled. He fell with a muffled grunt, the human slamming an elbow into his throat before tearing the shock staff from his limp fingers. Above them, the Queen rose higher on her throne, voice raised in panic. Contain him. But it was too late. Again, the human spun, ducking under a plasma blade, sliding across the black sand. He pivoted, used the second fallen guard's body as a shield against the third elite's thermal spear, then drove a knee into the guard's gut, ripping away his weapon mid-motion. The crowd stopped roaring. They gasped, because now it was no longer justice. It was execution, but not of the human, of their illusions. The last elite hesitated. Fatal mistake. The human lunged, snapping the chain into his face. The guard staggered back, plasma blade flaring uselessly, and the human wrenched it from his grip, stood tall. For the first time armed. For the first time, smiling like the weapon he truly was. The Queen stood frozen. She had thought this would be spectacle. A demonstration. Now it was prophecy. And across every broadcast feed, millions whispered the same words. He's not fighting to survive. He's fighting to finish. He could have run. The gates were open now, exposed in the chaos. The corridors beyond beckoned like a promise of survival. But he didn't move toward them. Because humans don't escape. They finish. The human stood in the center of the pit, plasma blade humming low in his hand, broken chain wrapped around his forearm like a blackened snake. He stared up at the throne, at the queen, who hovered too high to reach, but no longer high enough to be untouchable. You think pain breaks us? His voice rolled through the arena, not shouted, but carrying, amplified by the fear now soaking into the very walls. You don't understand. He raised the plasma blade slightly, blood dripping from his fingers onto the sand. We store it. The queen didn't respond. Couldn't. Because now everyone could see it. The shift. This was no longer a trial. This was the beginning of a reckoning. And it wore the face of a man she had tried to break. She rose higher on her throne, voice cracking through the pit. Kill him. Kill him now. 30 elite guards stormed the perimeter. Obsidian armor. Twin shock lances. Neural link coordination. A wall of trained killers. The human didn't blink. He dropped the plasma blade at his feet, raised his fists, and smiled. The first wave hit him like a storm. But storms are what humans are made for. He moved low, dodging the first 2 lances. The broken chain snapped out, catching one across the knee, folding him to the ground. A spinning elbow shattered another's faceplate. A shoulder roll stole a lance from a stunned guard's hands. He turned it instantly, driving it into another's side. No hesitation. No wasted movement. They fought by doctrine. He fought like survival incarnate. The arena filled with the sounds of breaking bone, sputtering grav fields, gasps of disbelief. Above them, the queen clutched the arms of her throne, knuckles white, face pale against her crimson skin. She had built this arena to shame him. Instead, it had become his altar. The human moved like a force of nature. He wasn't clean or graceful. He was efficient. He ducked, weaved, slammed, broke, turned every weapon against its master. 1 minute, 2, and 10 elite guards lay in the dust. The others hesitated now, and hesitation was death. He ripped a pulse blade from a fallen enemy, twisted, parried, drove it home. Another dropped. Another staggered back, blood blooming from shattered armor. Across the broadcast feeds, commentators fell silent. No words left. Only the image, a bare-chested human, bloodied, broken, but standing, victorious. And then, he reached the depot. Not because he knew their technology, because he knew how to adapt. A grav pack strapped to his back. 2 shock grenades clipped to his waist. A cruciform spike launcher, designed to plant flags on battlefields, gripped in one hand. He smiled grimly. Yeah, that'll do. They sent more. Elite of the elite. Shock troops bred for obedience. Trained to kill. Augmented to dominate. But it didn't matter. Because humans, when cornered, don't get smarter. They get lethal. He exploded into them like a storm of iron and blood. He ducked under swings. Used falling bodies as shields. Slammed the butt of a pulse blade into a helmet. Spun. Drove a knee into an exposed joint. Chain. Steel. Blood. Velocity. He didn't block. He redirected. He didn't parry. He destroyed. Each motion fed the next, a seamless dance of destruction. Above, the queen stood frozen. She couldn't look away. None of them could. The camera zoomed in on her face, regal mask cracking, fear leaking out between flawless features. Because she realized what everyone else had already seen. She wasn't watching a man fighting to survive. She was watching a man erasing her legacy. When the last of the elite fell, blood misting the air in soft arcs, the human didn't celebrate. He didn't roar. He simply walked. Toward the throne room. Toward her. Dragging the chain. And the spike launcher. And all the weight of the reckoning he had promised. The queen tried to rally herself. Tried to speak. Her voice cracked like brittle glass. I am the queen of the Zerati Dominion. I order you to stand down. He paused at the threshold of the throne room. Turned his head slightly. And smiled. A slow, merciless, patient smile. The kind of smile that says, you slapped a human once. And now you're going to watch what that costs. He raised the spike launcher. Not at her. At the throne itself. The symbol of her reign. And fired. The iron spike punched through the base of the throne, anchoring it to the obsidian floor with a screech of tearing metal. No more escape. No more retreat. Only her. Hanging there. On her own broken symbols. The human advanced slowly, chain rattling at his side. The galaxy held its breath. Because it wasn't about killing her. Not yet. It was about memory. About making sure that when she fell, the whole universe would see. He didn't rush. Humans understand something predators often forget. The slower the step, the heavier the fear. He walked toward her, one step at a time, chain trailing like a living shadow, spike launcher slung across his back. Blood dripped from his knuckles onto the golden floor of the throne room, staining it with a deeper truth than any crown could proclaim. The queen backed away. Not regally. Not defiantly. Like prey. You don't understand what you're doing, she said, voice trembling now, stripped of its usual venom. He tilted his head slightly. No. She didn't understand. Not when she slapped him. Not when she humiliated him. Not even now. You didn't understand, he whispered, voice carrying across the cavernous hall, when you struck me in front of your empire. Her lips parted, a protest rising, but it died before reaching the air. Because she could see it now in his eyes. There was no mercy there. Only memory. You are a war criminal, she shouted, panic sharpening her words. You'll be hunted across the stars. He smiled again, slow and terrible. They'll build statues before they catch me. And she believed him. Because somewhere deep inside, in the part of herself still clinging to rationality, she realized that the galaxy was no longer watching her authority. They were watching his legend take root. She tried again, voice rising, desperate. I am the queen of the Zerati Dominion. I command you to kneel. He didn't even pause. He walked right past her golden throne, the throne she had stained with centuries of obedience, and tore down a ceremonial banner bearing her crest, the symbol of her reign. He wrapped it around her wrists. Slowly, deliberately, like binding history itself. She struggled, but his hands were unshakable. She whimpered when he bent a steel bar from the wreckage into a rough brace, locking her forearms tight. Please, she gasped, voice cracking under the weight of watching billions. Not here. He paused. Here. Exactly here. He slammed her to her knees at the edge of the royal balcony, the same spot where she had once slapped him, broadcast across the stars as entertainment. Now the stars were watching again. But the roles were reversed. He planted the broken cruciform structure into the balcony floor, cracking the obsidian beneath their feet. The camera drones swarmed closer, catching every brutal, perfect angle. He lifted her effortlessly, bound her against the cross, raised her for all to see. The queen sobbed, not with dignity, not with anger, with terror. Please, I'm sorry. He stared up at her for a long, cold moment, let her words hang, brittle and desperate, then said the only words she would ever hear from him again. So was I. And you slapped me anyway. He hammered a spike not through her body, but through the beam behind her, locking her wrists in place. It wasn't an execution. It was a sentence. The galaxy leaned closer. Cities watched in stunned silence. Noble houses dropped their crests into fire. In the streets of Irica Prime, crowds who once cheered now rioted. Royal banners were torn down. Statues smashed into dust. Because no one had expected this. Because no one had ever seen this. Not a war. Not a coup. A reckoning. Pure. Inevitable. Above them all, strapped to the crucifix, hair matted, robe shredded, the queen sobbed openly. No one helped her. Not even her most loyal guards. They had seen too much. Because the human didn't just defeat her armies. He didn't just shatter her power. He destroyed something deeper. He broke the belief that she was invincible. And no empire survives that. In the control rooms across the system, commentators whispered over open channels. He didn't bring an army. He didn't carry a banner. He just walked in and made her kneel. And somewhere beyond Irica Prime, in shadowed halls and secret chambers, rulers across the galaxy watched and understood. This was not a victory of blood. This was a funeral of illusions. And the grave marker was a crucifix made from her own shattered throne. He didn't wait for the crowd's reaction. He turned his back on her, on the whimpering figure now strapped like a warning against the throne she once ruled, and simply walked away. No words. No claim. No demand for a crown. Because it was never about ruling. It was about remembering. The cameras caught everything. The slow, deliberate pace of a man bleeding from 100 wounds, dragging the broken chain like a signature behind him. And across the galaxy, something ancient and furious stirred. It wasn't rebellion. It wasn't a call to arms. It was recognition. That moment, the Red Queen crucified, the human walking untouched through the ruins of her power, burned itself into the collective memory of civilizations. In the streets of Irica Prime, chaos reigned. The golden statues of the queen were torn down by her own citizens, faces once weeping at her victories now screaming her name like a curse. The royal banners, once draped from the highest spires, now smoldered in the gutters. And above it all, the broadcast continued. Unedited. Unstoppable. The queen hanging limp against cracked iron, her head slumped forward, her hair matted with blood and ash. The human had vanished into the alleyways, into the debris and the dust. But his absence shouted louder than any speech. Because he hadn't just beaten her. He had rewritten the rules. 3 days later, they finally took her down. Quietly. No ceremony. No resistance. They found her curled against the ruins of her own throne, eyes wide open, silent, staring at a sky that no longer recognized her authority. She never spoke again. Not to her advisors. Not to her soldiers. Not even to herself. Because in her silence, every throne across the galaxy trembled. They realized the truth she had learned too late. You can kill a body. You can shatter a fleet. But when you humiliate a human and leave him breathing, you create a storm no force can contain. Within a week, the Dominion collapsed. Worlds once shackled to her name declared independence, forging new alliances under one silent, unwritten law. Never humiliate a human. They called it the doctrine of reckoning, a simple decree. If ever again a human is disgraced by royalty, let it be known, we have seen what comes next. Old enemies of the Dominion signed it eagerly. Former allies whispered it with fear. Neutral states broadcast it as a warning to all sovereign powers. The Queen's image, once chiseled in obsidian and lit in fire across capital cities, was pulled down. In its place, a new statue rose. A man, bare-chested, chain wrapped around one forearm, eyes calm, unyielding, and behind him, a shattered throne. The military scholars labeled it tactical insurgency. The sociologists called it cultural detonation. The philosophers named it the iron lesson. But among the people, it was something simpler. The day the Queen got crucified. And no one laughed when they said it. Because even years later, across distant colonies and newly free planets, mothers whispered the story to their children like a prayer. Respect humans, or face what comes. The Red Queen's name became a ghost, her empire a cautionary tale. And as for him, he was still out there. They said he didn't join any rebellion, didn't form an army, didn't crown himself anything. He just wandered, moving silently between new rulers, new coronations, new thrones rising in the vacuum the Dominion left behind. And sometimes, when a new monarch was crowned, a young king too full of himself, a queen too quick to mock, they would pause, feel a shiver, and glance into the crowd. And there he would be, a shadow, a scar, chain wrapped around his arm, watching, waiting, not to destroy, not to conquer, but to remind them, respect is cheaper than vengeance. No one dared announce him. No council voted for it. No system formally acknowledged his existence. And yet, across 1,000 worlds, his shadow became law. They called him many names. The Man of Chains, the Last Reckoner, the Silent Storm. But he didn't need a title. His memory alone was enough to rewrite how power was worn, how crowns were placed, how voices were raised. At the coronation of the new king of Ferox, the court paused mid-ceremony when one of the drone cameras panned across the gathering and caught a glimpse of him. Same scars, same quiet, same chain wrapped around his forearm like a patient threat. The king stuttered through his oaths. The soldiers standing guard shifted uncomfortably. And in the far corners of the galaxy, the image spread faster than any official decree. He's watching. And that was enough. No declarations were signed that day. No new taxes imposed. No subjugations proclaimed. Because when humans remind the stars of their scars, even thrones learn to kneel. He never spoke. He never intervened. He never needed to. The rulers who tried to forget, those who thought memory could be erased with monuments and gold, found themselves waking in cold sweats, hearing the echo of a single, blood-soaked chain dragging across the floor. And the new monarchs, the wise ones, made changes. They built schools instead of prisons, hospitals instead of execution arenas. And when their advisors asked, confused, why waste the treasury on mercy, they answered simply, we remember. He became myth wrapped around bone, steel stitched into the fabric of politics. The galaxy itself began to shift, not out of kindness, not out of nobility, out of fear. Because no matter how far they ran, no matter how deep their fortresses were buried, they knew. If they humiliated a human again, if they raised their hand in arrogance, if they forgot the weight of what had been lost, he would find them, and they would fall. One day, a diplomat dared to visit the ruins of the old Dominion Palace. The crucifix still stood. The winds had stripped it bare, but the cracked beams remained. An eternal reminder. The diplomat, a scholar of history, placed a small iron chain at its base, then turned and whispered into the endless, broken hall. We have not forgotten. Some say he watched, hidden in the ruins, silent, measuring, approving. Because for humans, memory isn't a weapon of vengeance. It's a weapon of hope, a razor against tyranny. And he had carved that truth so deep into the bones of history that even the stars seemed to burn a little brighter in its light. He didn't stay long anywhere. His legend moved faster than any fleet could catch. And when he disappeared, no one hunted him, because they knew. He wasn't coming for power. He wasn't coming for revenge. He was the reckoning waiting for those who forgot. The Red Queen had tried to make an example of him. Instead, she became his warning. And the galaxy wore that warning like a brand against its skin. Because now they understood. Humans don't always strike first. But they make damn sure you never strike again. Years later, on a nameless world at the edge of the known galaxy, they crowned another ruler. A young queen. Brilliant. Beautiful. Ambitious. Too ambitious. The coronation was a spectacle of wealth and dominance. The palace floors polished to mirrors, the golden banners stretched across the violet skies. And just before she placed the crown upon her head, she paused. The crowd shifted, sensing something. The air grew heavy, thick with a tension ancient and primal. Her eyes scanned the assembly, heart thudding. And there he was, standing at the very back, leaning against a blackened pillar. No entourage, no armor, just a man, scarred, silent, wrapped in a simple coil of chain. Watching, he didn't move, didn't speak. He just existed. And the weight of that existence was enough. The queen's hand trembled above the crown. She lowered it slowly, turned to the assembly, and instead of demanding loyalty, she knelt. Not out of weakness, out of understanding, out of survival. The cameras caught it, broadcast it instantly. The new monarch of a powerful system choosing humility before pride, memory before arrogance. The galaxy understood the message without a single word. She had seen the chain, and she remembered. Because in the end, it wasn't banners or fleets or bloodlines that held the stars together. It was memory, and the man who had made memory sharper than any blade still walked among them. Not as a king, not as a god, not even as a warrior. As a reminder, you can build empires, you can crush worlds, you can enslave millions. But if you strike a human in public and leave him breathing, then somewhere, someday, you will face him again. And he will bring everything you built crashing down. Not with armies, not with violence, but with a silence louder than any war cry, a chain heavier than any crown, and a memory sharper than any sword. Across the systems, the new rulers taught their heirs a new rule. Respect those who endure, for they have already survived more than you can imagine. They whispered it in palaces, in military academies, in hidden bunkers. Because they knew, the man wasn't the only one. He was just the first to show them that a single human with enough pain, enough patience, and enough silence could topple a throne harder than any army ever could. They remembered. They would always remember. And somewhere, out in the endless dark, walking between broken empires and rising hopes, he kept moving. Not to conquer, not to rule, simply to watch. To make sure they never forgot what he taught them the day a queen slapped a man. And the galaxy learned what fear truly was.